I'm Christine. The courtroom was deathly silent as the foreman uttered the single, decisive word, guilty. I stared at the man sitting across the room, Patrick, my father's former partner, now a broken shell of his once confident self. The weight of the past 10 years, the nightmares, the silence, it all seemed to lift in that moment. 10 years ago, I was just a 6-year-old girl. My family was well off. My dad, Richard, was a successful banker known for his integrity in Philadelphia. My mom, Emily, was a kind-hearted schoolteacher. We had a beautiful house on the outskirts of the city, filled with love and laughter. But one fateful night, that all changed. The air was thick with the smell of rain and something more sinister. The red and blue lights of the police cars flashed against the brick walls of our quiet street. Detective Henry stepped out of his unmarked car. He was a seasoned cop, but nothing could have prepared him for the horror that awaited inside our home. The front door was kicked in, hanging precariously on its hinges. Shards of glass from the broken vase in the hallway sparkled like diamonds. A family portrait lay shattered near the entry, our smiling faces now in pieces. In the living room, my dad was sprawled on the carpet, blood seeping into the fine Persian rug. My mom's body was near the fireplace, her arm outstretched as if she was reaching for me. My older brother, Jake, was slumped against the couch, his eyes wide with terror. I was hiding under the bed in my parents' bedroom. I was so scared that I couldn't make a sound. I could hear the footsteps of the intruder, the heavy breathing. Then, I heard the detective's voice. "Christine," he whispered. "It's okay. You're safe now." But I was too frozen with fear to move, to cry, to speak. In the weeks that followed, the investigation was tough. Henry was relentless, but there was little evidence. Dad had no known enemies. The forensic team searched every corner of the house, but there were hardly any leads. They checked fingerprints, ran DNA tests, and traced phone calls, but nothing matched. Eventually, the case was shelved as unsolved, much to Henry's frustration. I was placed in the waiting room of Child Protective Services. Henry saw me there, my small legs dangling from a chair that was too big for me. I stared blankly at the wall, unable to utter a single word. I felt like the horror had stolen my voice along with my family. When Henry found out that there were no relatives coming forward to take me in, he couldn't bear the thought of me going into the foster care system. He decided to apply for guardianship. It wasn't easy for him. He was a divorced man, used to living alone. But a few weeks later, I moved into his small townhouse on the edge of the city. At first, I was like a ghost in the house, clutching my favorite teddy bear that I had managed to save. I communicated only with nods and shrugs, or by scribbling words on scraps of paper when necessary. As the years went by, I grew from a terrified child into a reserved teenager. I still didn't speak, but my eyes said a lot. Henry understood me better than anyone. Every night, after I went to bed, he would sit at the kitchen table, poring over the cold case files. He was determined to find the person who had destroyed my life. One rainy day, Henry brought me a box full of art supplies. He said it was for me. I was 16 then, and my silence had become a part of me. I glanced at the box and then went back to my book, giving only a slight nod. The box gathered dust in the corner of my room for weeks. Then, one gray afternoon in November, I started painting. Henry heard the soft scratching sound coming from my room. He hesitated at the door and then gently pushed it open. I was sitting on the floor, painting a storm of emotions. There were no clear shapes, just chaos. But Henry smiled and said, "It's beautiful." And that gave me the courage to keep going. Over the next few weeks, my paintings multiplied. I would shut myself in my room every evening after school. Henry never intruded. One night, as he was tidying up my discarded sketches, he noticed a small, curved shape that appeared again and again. It wasn't random, it was deliberate. The next day, Henry took some of the sketches to a diner to meet his old partner, Patrick. Patrick just shrugged and said it looked like teenage angst. He told Henry to stop digging into the past. But Henry couldn't let it go. That curve reminded him of something in the case files, something he had seen before. As my paintings evolved, a shadowy figure started to appear. It was like a dark presence, watching, threatening. I wrote "It's coming back" under one of the paintings. Henry was worried. He installed new locks, reinforced the windows, and adjusted his work schedule to be with me more. But the feeling of danger didn't go away. Patrick started visiting more often. He brought me small gifts, like sketchbooks and concert tickets. He joked with me, but there was something about his behavior that made Henry uneasy. He asked too many questions about my therapy sessions and my paintings. One evening, when Henry came home early, he found Patrick and me looking at my sketches. Patrick acted nervously when he saw Henry. That's when Henry decided to go back into the archives. He found a small note in the evidence log about a silver pen engraved with the initials R. C. Dad never used a fancy pen like that. He also remembered a silver pen in one of my paintings. It was as if the shadow was holding it. If I had seen it, then the killer had been in my room, close enough to see me, but for some reason, they had left me alive. The next day, Henry called Patrick to meet him. He showed Patrick the photo of the pen. Patrick's reaction was strange. He seemed uncomfortable and told Henry to let the past go. But Henry was more suspicious than ever. Then, one Tuesday morning, the folder with my sketches disappeared from Henry's office. Before he could figure it out, he was called in by Internal Affairs. They had an anonymous complaint saying he was exploiting me for an old case. He was suspended, and Child Protective Services was notified. A few days later, I was taken away from Henry. It was a devastating blow. I was so confused and scared. But then, Henry received a call from Dr. Jessica, my therapist. She said I had drawn something important. When Henry went to see it, he was shocked. It was a black Mercedes, and 3 characters of the license plate were clear. It was Patrick's car. The next drawing was a face. It was my dad, but with a scar on his cheek that wasn't in any of the crime scene photos. This meant I had seen my dad alive during the attack. Putting the pieces together, Henry realized that Dad must have been involved in something illegal, maybe money laundering in the bank. Patrick, his partner, knew about it. When Dad wanted to back out and cooperate with the police, Patrick panicked. He killed Dad, and when Mom and Jake walked in, he had to silence them too. And I, hiding under the bed, had witnessed it all. Henry knew he had to see me. Against the rules, he sneaked into the trauma center where I was staying. When I saw him, I finally spoke for the first time in 10 years. "Shadow," I whispered. He showed me a photo of Patrick, and I pointed at him. Then he asked me to draw the man I saw that night. I did, and it was unmistakably Patrick. The next morning, Henry took my drawing and a silver cufflink with the letter C on it that an old guard at the archives had found near Patrick to Captain Miller. The evidence was thin, but they gave Henry 24 hours to get something more solid. That night, Henry called Patrick and told him they needed to talk. They agreed to meet at an old abandoned factory on the outskirts of the city. When Patrick arrived, he acted as if nothing was wrong. But when Henry showed him my drawing, Patrick's face went pale. He tried to deny everything at first, but then he admitted that Dad was going to talk, and he had to stop him. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," he said. "But I had to keep myself safe." Henry was furious. "You took away my chance to bring justice to Christine's family all these years," he said. Patrick pulled out a gun and aimed it at Henry. But just then, a team of tactical officers emerged from the shadows. Captain Miller stepped forward and said, "It's over, Patrick. Drop the weapon." Patrick tried to escape, but he was cornered. He tried to shoot himself, but Henry stopped him in time. The trial was long and difficult, but in the end, Patrick was found guilty of all charges. His confession during the final confrontation and the evidence we had gathered, including my drawings, sealed his fate. He was sentenced to life imprisonment without parole. After the trial, the department wanted Henry back, but he decided to stay at home with me. Slowly, I started to find my voice again. One evening, as he was cooking dinner, I walked into the kitchen and said, "Dad." He dropped the spoon in his hand and hugged me tightly. Spring came to Philadelphia, and we went to the park near our house. I took out my sketchbook and drew a simple house with lights on in every window and a warm fire in the chimney. There were no shadows, just light and hope. Henry looked at my drawing and said, "It's beautiful." And as I sat there beside him, I knew that the nightmare was finally over, and we had both found a new beginning.